Start recording. I'm going to share my desktop one more time for good measure. So does it come, the desktop coming through on your end? Like you can minimize it, but. Okay, cool. All right, so just to kind of look at where we are here. Let's run another class. All right, so this is the third week of this course. So the AM stands for meeting. This is refreshing. We're on meeting 3 here. So this is the material that we're going to talk about today. Really, I've titled today's lecture Sequences. So today is really the last full day that we'll spend just talking about the mechanics of the Python programming language. And after today, we'll tackle a few more. We'll start the journey into applying Python to problems in GIS. Now, we have done some things that are actually kind of common to GIS problem solving, like talking about points and the distances along a line and things like that. Not that they'd be. What I'm saying is not that they wouldn't be totally useless in a GIS workflow. There might be a case which you would use that sort of information. But starting next week, we'll really start to tackle GIS data and looking at automating GIS workflows. But before we do that, we need to spend the last week, which is today, covering one more important topic, and that is sequences. And sequences are a group of data types. Now, when I say a data type in Python programming, what am I referring to? What's a data type?
Like integer?
Yeah, integer is a data type. Good. So data type is the type of a specific variable. Remember we used that term before? So all variables have a type. Okay, you can't have an untyped variable. In Python, you don't have to explicitly say what it is before it's created, but Python will always make a particular variable have a type. So if you say x is equal to 3, Python will assume that you want to create an integer. If you say Python is equal to 3.0, Python assumes that you want to create a floating point number, and it will make x equal to it'll be 3, but it'll be holding a floating point. If you say x is equal to quote 3 quote, then what data type have you just created?
String.
Yes. Okay. This carries forward with these sequence data types. Sequence data types are also created, and how you create them implies what they are. Now, as we move into sequences, we'll learn that strings are actually sequences. But besides strings, most of these sequence data types, you don't always create them on your own. Okay. So as we start doing the GIS problems next week, we might want to know, hey, shapefile. What's a shapefile in the GIS world? What am I talking about? What is a shapefile?
Information for your map.
Points, lines, or polygons. It's information. It's map information. Exactly. It is a GIS layer. That's probably the answer I was looking for. But and you all know that, right? If you've taken a GIS course before, a shapefile is a GIS layer. And so we might ask a GIS layer, what are all the fields in the layer? And it will return, like when we ask a GIS layer, what are all the the fields that you have, it will return to us in a function. It's one of the reasons why we learned about functions. It will return to us in a function. The result of the function will be a sequence. It'll be a sequence of field names. So a sequence is a data type that is a variable that's actually a group of other variables. So in other words, it's a sequence is a bunch of variables all grouped together in a single variable. That's what a sequence is. Okay. So that is what a string really is. A string, it's even called a string because it's really just a set of characters. So another way to define what a string is it's a sequence of characters. In reality, characters are just numbers in the computer, but they've been told to represent a character. I don't know if any of you have heard of the ASCII character code. So here is a table. Now, you definitely don't need to remember any of this, but this is just to show you that, like, for instance, a capital A is actually stored in the computer as the number 65. Then it can be represented in, let's see what this column represents. I don't even know what this column represents. It can be represented in octal, hex, or binary. Really, binary is the way the computer is actually representing that, capital A. It's being represented as 01000001. And that is actually the number 65. Okay. Because there is a 1 in the 64's column and a 1 in the 1's column. Okay. So you may or may not have ever discussed different numbering base systems, but these are the powers of 2. So we, 2 to the first, 2 to the second, 2 to the third, and so on. Again, that's not going to be tested, but what a string is actually storing in the computer system is just a bunch of numbers, and because it's also been told that it's a data type of type string, it knows to read those numbers and show them to any user as characters. Okay, so that's what they've been told to represent. There are several ways to actually represent strings. Python kind of hides that for you. There's the ASCII character codes. There's Unicode character codes. But occasionally in Python, you'll ask for a variable, and it'll look like, oh, I'm getting a message here. Still going, right? Occasionally in Python, you'll ask what's in a variable. You'll say print x, and you'll get a response that looks kind of like this. U thing, right? So that's a string that contains thing, but instead of being stored the traditional way, it's stored using the Unicode system. That's what that means. But typically, if you ask a string what's in it, it'll just look like that. So that's a string that contains 4 characters, 5 characters. Capital T, little h, little I, little n, and little g. So, yeah, there is a different code for a capital versus lowercase. Every single character has a different code. So 97 is actually lowercase a. Sorry, was there a question or comment? All right. So let's talk about some things that sequences can do. Actually, before we do that, let's talk about some string operators. I already actually talked about upper and lower, but I haven't yet talked about erase, find, and finally split. Those are some other functions that strings can have. So anything that's a string data type can do these things. And then we'll talk about some things that all sequences can do. So I'm going to change this to string examples. All right. So if I create a string, I'll just call this sentence equals the brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. I think that's the right sentence. That's the sentence that I used to have to type back in typing class in 7th grade. I'm not exactly sure what the reason is. I think it's because it has mostly all the letters, or a lot of the letters in a sentence, on the keyboard. We'll run that, and all that did was read sentence in. Okay. I'm actually going to keep it in the same cell here. Okay. All right, so the first one is that we could take a bunch of characters, a sequence of characters, which is a string, and we can use the upper function to capitalize everything. Now, we haven't explicitly talked about what this is, this dot means. Okay. This dot notation that appears is when a function is attached to a specific data type. We call that a procedure or a method. Those are both interchangeable computer science terms for a function that attaches itself to a specific data type. And a data type, the general term for something that has this particular data type, is actually referred to as a class. So the more formal way to do this is say that sentence is a variable or an instance of the class string. Okay. If we were to generalize that terminology, I might say that George is an instance of class human. I am an instance, George, that's me, am an instance of class human. Now, obviously, I can't set George equal to another variable. So that's not, it doesn't, so the analogy doesn't quite fit with everything. Okay, but here in the computer science world, sentence is an instance of the class string. It is a string. And when we have an instance of a class, we actually refer to that particular entity as an object. So object and variable are almost interchangeable. But an object usually refers to something that's more complex than a simple data type, like a number, floating point number, or true false, like a Boolean. Okay.
Then a period behind the sentences also tell you to do something with sentence. What is to do something? Change of case. So whatever that period is, whatever preceding it, you're telling that period to do something with it, and you got to know the term to what you want. You want to lowercase it, uppercase it.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Now look what do you think happens if I just type in sentence now, or maybe more explicitly print sentence. Right. So if I actually want to store the result of that function, I have to set it equal to something. So I could call it like upper sentence. I got to spell things right. Upper cent. I don't actually have to spell things right because this is a variable, but I'm going to spell it right. So now I'm going to print both of them. So I'm printing both sentence and upper sentence. Run that. So now it'll print both. But notice that just because I say sentence dot upper, it doesn't actually change the original sentence there. It's a function that returns a value. So you have to set something equal to it in order to capture that value. I think, there's a few questions last week about why do you even need to return? Okay, well, inside of that function, the result is, so there's a return statement that converts all those letters to capital and so on. Now, there is also another function that lowers it. So I'll call this lower. So if I run this, it doesn't look that much different. What did that? Oh, because it printed upper sentence. Okay. If I run this, it doesn't look that much different besides the T is lowercase. See how the T was uppercase here, and then the T was lowercase there. Okay. What other functions did I mention that we would talk about? Let me see here. Oh yeah, replace. Replace is another important one for strings. So let's say that I wanted to take this sentence and I want to replace the word dog with the word cat. So what this is going to do, I'll just call this new sentence. What this is going to do is it's going to search for every instance of the word dog in my sentence and replace it with the word cat. So if I run this guy, it'll say the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, but then in the new sentence where I've run the word replace, it changes it to the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy cat. So it replaces anything, it searches through the sentence, and anywhere where it finds the word dog, it replaces it with the word a cat. So that could be useful, like if you had, this actually is where I use it probably the most often. If I'm going to, if I have a file name that represents a shapefile or another GIS layer, and I want to do something to it, like let's say I want to buffer it, so and it's called roads, and I want to change that. So after I buffer it, I replace in the original, I replace the name of the string with roads buffer. So I replace roads with roads buffer or something like that. Okay.
And could you use that, Dr. Wade, if you was articulating a document and it's probably about 1,000 pages, you don't want to go look for each one, so you write a Python statement to replace every particular word, like say cat or dog, and go through the whole thing.
Exactly right. Like you could very easily write a program. We'll talk about reading files next week, but you could very easily write a program where you do a file and find every instance of something and change it. So, there's all sorts of applications for that. Let's say that somebody wrote a paper and they wanted to make sure that all the instances of a particular word were capitalized. You could read through and find the ones where they weren't capitalized and capitalize them or something like that. Okay, then the next function is find. So I'm just gonna. I don't actually need to keep copying sentence here, but I'm gonna run. Sentence dot find, and then I'm going to put in fox and run that. All right, I get a value of 16. What do you think that might mean there? Yes, exactly. Okay, so what that's saying is that the letter, that means, sorry, fox, the substring fox is 16 places into the string sentence. Now if we go up here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So it looks like it starts just after. It's the 17th letter. All right, so this actually brings up an important concept, and that is that all the sequences we're going to talk about today, and every sequence except for one that we'll talk about next week, is what we call indexed. In other words, we can find pieces of a sequence by their index. In fact, we could say sentence, and we could say we want just the 16th thing. I got 16. I put run, and I think I'm going to get F. Yep, I got F, because that's the 16th number. And when I say they're indexed, they're actually indexed starting at 0. So if I go sentence 0 and run that, I get T, which is the very first one. So 0 is T, 1 is little h, 2 is E, 3 is a space, just to show you that we can. Spaces actually still are things. Run that, and I get 0. I mean, I get not 0. Sorry, I get a space. That's actually a space right there.
So space is the character.
Space is a character. Yep. Even a tab is technically a character, even though it takes up more than one space on the screen. It's still just a single character. Sorry, Ashley. You got a question?
Oh no, this is fine. Is there a reason why they're in brackets instead of parentheses? Is that just how you have to type it in?
So that's how you access the individual element. Is the new word here. When you access the element of a sequence, you use a bracket. When you're running a function, it's a parenthesis. We're not running a function here. We're actually accessing an element inside of a sequence, and we always use a bracket. That's a great question, bringing that up. So that is a bracket, everyone, not a parenthesis. And when we access the elements and any element of a sequence, we use those bracket characters to get them. So this is saying I want the 16th element of this string. This is saying I want the first. Well, I guess this should technically, if this is the first, that would be the 17th. So, or we could say that's the 0th. Okay. 16th or the 17th, depending on the way you look at it, the 0th or the first. Just remember, it starts with 0. It goes all the way up. So the last element is actually the length minus 1. Now there is a function that you can use to get the length of any sequence. That's the length operator, len. So we can get the length of sentence. Okay. 44. So that's the length. So if I ask for sentence 44, what's going to happen? Any guesses? What's that? You'd think it'd be the period, right? But remember, since it's 0 based, 44 is actually just beyond. There's not actually 44. There are 44 characters, but remember, since we start counting at 0, 44 is just beyond the end. So when you see an error like this, index is out of range, what it's doing is saying that it can't, that is longer, 44 is longer than this sequence. So, what's that?
Nothing's occupying the space.
Right. Exactly. So let's say there's 10 students in the class and we have them all lined up alphabetically, and somebody says, what's the 11th student in your class alphabetically? I'd say, there's not 11 students in my class, right? So that's what happens. It's what it's saying. There's not 44 characters in there. That's the error that you get when you try to ask for something that's outside of the range. Okay. So 43 will work. That'll give us the period, but not 44. All right. Okay, so the last thing, or not the last one. Actually, there's two more concepts with that I'll cover here with strings. One is that we can actually access a portion of any string by the numbers, and that's called a slice. So we can say, let's just say we want just the part that says the quick brown fox. We don't care about the rest. We could say that we want sentence, and then we want a slice of the sentence starting with 0 and going to 16. Now run that. And it says the quick, oh, I forgot. Fox starts at 16. So if we want fox, we need to go another 3 characters. 16, what's that? To 19. There we go. So now we're going to get the quick brown fox. Likewise, if we want the remainder of the sentence, we could say we want 19 to what?
43.
Yep. So we get jumps over the lazy dog.
So the slice, what's telling to do the slice is the bracket and the colon, right?
Yes, the colon. So the colon is the like saying 2. I want sentence starting at character 19, going to character 43. Now, one thing that's interesting here, if you look, that in this case, the index, the 2 index, the top index here, is where it ends. That's the last one that's not the last one you get. You don't get the 43rd character. So it goes from the 19th to the 43rd, but it doesn't include the top one. So interestingly, if you want that, you actually have to do 44 to get the entire thing.
What if you got like a really long list, or let's just say like a paragraph, you don't know the character range? How would you determine that? Like, how do you know that it's just 19 to 43 in the end? Like, what if you didn't know that?
Well, I mean, it depends on the problem you're trying to solve, right? But, sorry. But if, let's say that you're trying to solve a problem like, hey, I want to get the last 10 characters. And you don't know how long it is. How would you get the last 10? So you wouldn't even know, you wouldn't know. Let's say it was 100 characters. Or then next time it's 50 characters, and you just wanted the last 10. That was the problem that you're trying to solve. Well, how would you do that? Well, you could use the length function to determine how long it was. And then you actually you don't have to put whole numbers in here. So we could do sentence. You could do the length of the sentence minus 10 colon the length of the sentence. Right? So now we're getting the last 10 characters. I'll put a comment in here. Oh, sorry. Minus 10. There we go. So I'm taking, this will return a number, then I'll subtract 10. Before I was trying to subtract 10 from sentence. What is the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog minus 10? That's the error that I just got here. So now I run this, and now it just gives me the last 10 characters right there. Right? Now,
So the minus 10, it just knows to take it off the end.
well, because I'm going from, okay,
So if you did plus 10, would it be like the first 10 characters?
all right, so I don't know, have you done some of the, it sounds like, from the question you're asking, it sounds like you've done some of the reading.
I'm not there.
Okay, so if you haven't done any of the reading, then the question you're asking here makes it so that I didn't explain the concept very well here. So let's break apart this. Oops. So this is actually a number, right? Like the length of a sentence minus 10. What? Okay, here first let's do this. What does this code do right here?
It returns the total length of characters per sentence.
Right. So what would this do?
It takes away from the total number of characters.
It doesn't take away the total number of characters.
It returns the last 10 characters.
No.
You're right.
So
Like if it were going to return.
what's the data type of this once it's returned?
That's a string.
It's not a string.
Integer when it comes back.
Yes, when it comes back, it's an integer. So when I subtract 10, I'm just taking one number and I'm subtracting 10 from it. So I'm just getting another number, right? Now in English, we could say that that number will be 10 less than what? What's that? It'll be 10 less than 44, okay? But what does that number represent?
Where it starts, like so where you start counting, maybe?
Well, we haven't gotten that far yet. I mean, that's where we're going, but it represents the number of characters minus 10, right?
So, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. So basically, you're still telling it to read the total length, but your starting point is 10 characters from the end instead of the beginning.
Yeah, so when I'm going like this, okay. You ask how would I know how long a character is? Like what if I was looking for a specific part of a string, but I didn't know how long it was? So what I was trying to do is this is specific to this particular variable. Sentence I know is 44, so if I want the last 10 characters, I do sentence 34:44. Well, what if I don't know how long sentence is? If I don't know how long sentence is, then I do this. Because these are the same thing. This represents 34. This represents 44. The difference is that this line will work no matter how long sentence is. If I don't know how long sentence is, I'll still get the last 10 characters, right? This will only work if sentence is exactly 44 characters long. So if I'm reading through a file and I'm reading it by line, and I just want the last 10 characters of every line, because I know that they're like a coordinate or something, then this sentence works better. And then, I don't mean to be confusing even further, because I'm really not. This is actually trying to make it simpler. Python actually has some shortcuts for this type of thing. So what you can do is say that you want to go from -10 to the end. That actually is a shortcut for this line right here. It talks about this a bit in the reading. So this is going 10 over from the right side of the string to the end. So anytime you don't give it a number on one side or the other, you're going to the end of the sequence. See if I run this, I'll get the same. Strings must be integers. Oh. I thought that would work. String indices must be integers. Okay. That works.
Are we
Nope.
still talking about a slice?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I thought that would work in Python, but it doesn't. But this does work. What's it having a problem with there? Sentence minus. Oh, the colon. Okay, sorry. This will work. Sentence -10. So my problem was that I didn't put a colon there. All right. So this is an equivalent statement, as I thought.
Suppose Dr. Ray, if you have a list of names, Michael, Dean, George, and whatever, you could use the slice to determine which person you want to look at. Like a quick round fox, if you would just break them up into individual names, you can search for individual groups starting with particular.
Yep. That is the other one. The other concept I wanted to talk about is split. You're right. We'll talk about that in a second. You can split up a string into other strings. Yes. Okay. So this is shorthand for this. Is shorthand for this. So this just says give me the last 10 characters. If you wanted the first 10 characters, you could do this. This would say from the start, I want to go 10 characters in. That'll return just the first 10 characters.
You have to say 0 to the first 10 characters too?
Yeah, you could. Just the last 10. So you could slice a string up. Now, right now, I mean, if you have questions, of course, ask them. But the concept that it should be important to you right now is that you can like subset out pieces of strings. If you forget how to do this next week and I ask you to do it, then you can go look up how to do it again, right? And try to read about it. But the important thing here is that you can take pieces of strings. That's an important concept to be able to do. Is you can say, hey, I just want the beginning part. I just want the ending part. I want a part starting at the word fox. In other words, I could say, hey, I want everything starting at the word fox to the rest of the sentence. Let's practice writing that. So how do I know where Fox starts? What was the code to do that? What function? You can go back and look at the lecture notes or scroll up. How do I find the index of where the word fox starts in the sentence?
You type find.
Find, yes. Sentence.find. And then what do I do? Fox. Fox, by the way, in this case, this is what for the function? It's called a parameter for the function. So our function takes a single parameter called fox, and it's going to return the value 16, right? So do you see how we can just go like this? Sentence.find, and say colon there.
Would that be the character before fox begin or on the character?
Yeah, it would be before it begins. So you see how this evaluates to 16, and then this notation here with the colon and nothing behind it says what?
Continue to the end.
Continue to the end, yep. Return everything all the way to the end with that, kind of happy face. So now I get everything after that part. Fox jumps over the lazy dog. So yeah, it'll be more interesting to actually apply this to a problem than it is as I talk about it. And so here, what you're doing is learning that yes, I can take pieces of a string and cut them up, and that's the important take home there. Is that you can do that.
And you're also saying that if you begin with a bracket, you got to end with a bracket. Then with parentheses, you got to end with it. So you actually must have been.
You always have to have a bracket end and a bracket beginning. Exactly. Yep. All right. So now we're going to get on to Elvis's question. What if I want to break apart a string into its components, or into subcomponents, into sub string pieces? Well, I can use the split method. So I take a string like sentence and I split it. This function actually has two parameters, but we really only ever use the first parameter. Okay, the first parameter is what we call the delimiter. Anybody ever heard that term before? Delimiter. What's that?
Delimiter means to keep something back or keep it from something.
Well, that sounds like a limiter. I don't know, but in this case, it could maybe have that meaning. But in this case, a delimiter is the thing that will tell it. Basically, it's the separator. The things that determine what constitute different parts of your string. So in our sentence, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. If we choose a space, so what this says right here is sentence.split, parenthesis, this is a function, quote, space, quote. That means everywhere where it sees a space, it will turn that into its own string. I'm going to create a variable for this. I'm going to call this words. Words equals sentence.split, quote, space, quote. I'm going to run this guy. Oh, sorry. I got to print the words. Print words. So it's just the name of a variable. I could have called it something else. Now look what's happened. What does that look like? It's still the same sentence, right?
Right?
But everything is broken up into its own little element. What data type is this thing that we've just created? What data type is words?
Strings.
I heard somebody say an array, and that is very, very, a very, very good guess. And this is a type of an array, okay? It's a special data type that's in computer science terminology, it is like an array, but it's not exactly an array. It's a special data type in Python called a list, okay? So this is a list. This is your first introduction to list, and a list is a different sequence. Now, if we wanted to verify this was a list, how could we do that? What's a function that we've used before that helps us to determine the data type? What's a function that we could run that would return the data type? Sorry, Ashley, I cut you.
Info or something? We did it a few weeks ago.
We did it a few weeks ago, exactly. It's type. Type words. So I'm feeding the variable words into this function type, and it's going to return the data type, which is a list. Okay? So for those of you who have taken a computer science class before, an array is a group of variables that are stored in memory together, and strictly speaking, an array elements all need to be the same data type. Okay? That's actually not true with a list. A list can have strings and integers and everything. This list only has strings, okay? But a list can actually have a mix of different data types. But that's really the only big difference. All right, so we have now a list of the strings in words. See that? The quick brown. Yeah, go ahead.
So is the reason why it's split, like each word into its own section, because you wanted it to be split by the spaces? Is that what
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I could have done things is equal to. I'm just going to copy and paste this. Sentence dot split, but I could have chosen to split it every time there was the letter E. So now it's only going to split it at E's, and then I'm going to print things. And this will look weird, but now it split it into TH and quick brown fox jumps ove. See, there's an E right there, so it split it, and then over the, so it split it with the E there. Lazy dog. So now I chose to split it at the E rather than the space. Now, not very common. I mean, you might use that somewhere. There might be a reason for doing that. But typically, you're going to be reading through a file, and usually you're going to split it at either spaces, tabs, or commas. Commas is a pretty common place to split things. You might have a comma delimited file, CSV file. Yeah.
I've got a question. So, like, if someone was running a website and they wanted, and like people could contribute to the website, but they wanted to make sure that, like, I guess there's no curse words or something, could they, like, in their code for the website, put something with, like, split and then include, like, all the curse words, so that if someone was contributing, it would just skip that, basically?
Yeah, I mean, splitting would actually turn it into a list, and if you wanted to print it on screen, you have to turn it back into text. There is a command to do that, and that's join. So we could do, you actually put the name of the delimiter, you say join, and then you put the name of the list that you want to join. I'm pretty sure that it might be the opposite. Let me just check this. Yep, that's the way it works. So we're going to take spaces and we're going to join things. So let's just say fox was the bad word, right? We could run it and then join it, and we've just censored. We could like join it with nothing at all. We've just censored the word fox, I guess. That might be what you're talking about, right?
Basically.
The quick brown jumps over the lazy dog. It might be easier to use replace, you know.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, like, in a real life scenario, what, like, you would apply that to. Like, I understand what it does, but that's, like, kind of, I guess, having, like, a real example of what you would do it for.
Okay, now suppose I want to print out a jump over D. How would I say that?
Sorry, what was the question?
So if I want to print 2 or 3 different items up there, like it might say fox jump over, how would I do that on that? How can I slice those out? Print them?
I still don't understand your question. I'm sorry.
Okay, could I write print and then put 0, the colon, and 3? Would it print out 3 of those names at the top?
Oh yeah. So you're wondering, and this is like kind of where we're going. So with words up here, if I say I want just the first 3 words, I could do 0:3, 0:3, and run that, and that will give me just the first 3 words.
But you didn't define words though.
Yeah, words is up here. It's already defined. So these build on each other as long as they're having run. Words up here is defined.
Okay, good.
So that's a good point, is that I can do this notation right here for any sequence. So lists or strings, I can ask for just part of it. So here I get these 3 elements, the quick brown. This is technically a sequence of sequences, right? Words is a sequence, it's a list of strings, which are themselves sequences. And so if you really wanted to, you know, get into it, you could also do that with the results, but yeah, that would, I don't really.
Could I put 1, 3,
Yeah.
1, 5 there? What would return 1, 5?
1, 5.
Yes, 1, 5.
1, 5 is going to give us just quick brown fox, because that's the second word. 1 would be the second, all the way through the 5th word, but not including the 6th word. Quick brown fox.
The other one, but instead of using single characters, you're using whole words as if they were characters.
Well,
It's almost the same as the other one, but when you go on words, it's just find each one in a parentheses.
this says return these items from this list or from this sequence. Benjamin.
Okay, so how would you get that same function from join things that eliminated fox to apply to the words? Because see, it reprinted fox whenever you use words, because it doesn't know what the join things is.
What the join thing?
It says join things removed fox. So then when you want to get the words, it's pulling words from the
right. But remember,
array up there on line.
Remember, none of these functions we've talked about so far operate on the list or operate on the sequence, which is a list in this case, itself. this is returning that to you. If you want to store it somewhere, you have to store it somewhere. So this sentence right here is only there because it's the result of that function.
Right.
So this is going back to the original definition of words.
So on words, how would you change that to make it do that after you've already used join to get rid of Fox?
Well, I didn't.
Like if you wanted to get quick, brown, and jump, but still exclude the Fox.
Right.
Well, see, we didn't exclude Fox in the word. We only excluded Fox in thing. So they're two separate little worlds, right? Or right
Yeah,
now.
they're two separate variables. Right. They're in two separate, totally separate boxes. Things and words, and even the original things hasn't been changed. So if I just printed things out right here, that hasn't changed. I removed Fox, but it's still its own thing.
So would it be things 1 color 5, and that would eliminate Fox?
If I wanted to eliminate Fox,
Right, like if I wanted to get quick, brown, and jumps out of that, but not include Fox.
there's several ways to do it. We could look that up. Off the top of my head, the way that I would do it is say something like new words equals words. What's Fox? Fox is 0, 1, 2. So 1:3, we'll exclude it, plus words 4 colon, then to the end. Let's see what that does. Oh, I got to print new words. The quick brown jumps over, yeah. So this has removed Fox from the list.
That's cool. That's what I was wondering.
Now I don't have every single Python function memorized, but I could go remove from list Python. There's probably actually a function that will do that. Remove. There's probably a function that will remove. The remove method removes an item, which is passed in an argument. So let's go back to the original words. Dot remove Fox. Let's see if it removes it from. Okay, so it's already been removed now. So every time yeah, go ahead.
Can you insert the word Fox back in there?
Yeah, so you can always, we were going to get to this. You can always, in fact, we'll show that words dot append is the keyword for adding items. Now, what's interesting is that it's always going to put it at the end. So I'm going to print words. So now it's the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, fox, right? That doesn't work because fox is at the end.
Right.
Words dot remove. Let's see if it'll remove more than one instance of fox. Print words. Run. Nope, just remove the last instance. So run it again, and it removes it again. All right. What if we wanted to put fox back in that particular spot? Well, we would have to. I mean, one. Yeah, we'd have to. Let's see if insert is a. Insert into list Python. List.insert. Yep. So there's a function right here We could say words dot insert. What do you suppose the index represents here? It's position. It's exactly right. So which position do we need?
Oh,
So since they're separated, you just do 1, 2, 3.
it's right. Oh, it's right at the ground. So 1, 2, 3.
So I'm pretty sure that if we said 0, it'd put it at the beginning of the list. And so 1 is going to put it right between here. 2 is going to put it right between here. And 3 is going to put it right between there. So I think 3. Let's see if we're right. So now let's run this. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Yep. Yep. And I didn't know. One of the important things here is I didn't know for sure what that function was, and so I used the internet to find out what that was. Right. So there's a bunch of here's this was actually one of the helps that I gave you at the beginning of class. One of the places this is the Google Python course, so here they're showing lists, talking about them a bit. There's a few more things we're going to talk about in here. Oh, here's a bunch of list methods. So we've shown append, we've shown insert, we didn't show extend. We've also shown that you can add two lists together, though. You can get a particular index. So this is very similar to just doing it by using the brackets. You can remove elements, which we've done. You can actually sort a list, and then reverse, and then pop. Pop actually removes and returns the element at a given index. So it takes it out of the list when it's returning it to you.
So, Dr. Ray, if you kind of rename old cities that might have changed, in the database, you would find out what word it is and replace it with the new name of that city in that database. Could you do that in GHY?
Yeah.
You got updated city names, stuff like that. You got millions of lines of code. Just don't make sure it goes.
Yeah, you could use these functions to replace values in ESRI or wherever. Like if you wanted to look for all of the instances of Bombay and rename it Mumbai, then you could do that. So is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right. So somebody is this charging? Okay, good. It's charging. All right. So somebody was asking for a like maybe a more real example, and I said next week we're gonna read files, but let's just introduce that concept really quick, and we'll read a file, and we'll read some coordinates from a file, because this is actually a fairly common thing that I've done in the past. Is somebody gives me a file with a bunch of coordinates, and they want me to read it in. ArcGIS can do this, but sometimes depending on the style that the coordinate's in, it's easier just to write a simple program to do it. Okay, so let's say I have a notepad. So let's say I have a little file that has X chord, Y chord, and description for description. Right? And then for my X chord, I'm just gonna put in some random numbers here. 4.4 and 6.7 and red. 4.3. Well, here I'll go 5.3, 7.1 blue, and then 6.3, 10.1. I'm going to save this. I'm going to put this in a folder somewhere. I think I'll actually save it in where we've been working. So that's under where did I put all my stuff? This PC, documents. Here, I'll use this.
What did you say was the green? What? I didn't catch.
It doesn't really matter. You just have 3 sets of points. Like it isn't what numbers you use don't matter a whole lot, but yeah, I'll put that up there. Let's see here. So this is week 3. I'm just going to call this points.txt. So it's called points.txt, saved in that folder. At this point, I can close this out. And then I'm also going to save this, make sure I don't know if I saved this in the right place. Telling me to put it in a path relative. Rather than do that, I'm just going to save it. I'm going to close this because we're going to move on to another example. I wanted to actually put this in courses, SPA, week 3. I'm going to create a new one as the new example. So I'm going to change this to Markdown and say, in this notebook, we will read a file line by line and get the coordinates of each line. Okay. All right. So, because this code right here from the Google Help talks about how to read a file line by line in Python. It's really pretty basic. You can open a file, and then this is a function. There are 2 parameters. Where the file is located on disk, which is this parameter, and then what format you're opening your file for. Are you opening it to read? Are you opening it to write? Or are you opening it to read and write? Those are really the 3 options. Okay. I'm not even actually sure what RU means. I've never used it. So this says the special mode RU is the universal option, where it's smart enough about converting different line endings so they always come through. Okay, so if a file is created on a different file system, the ending of the line might be a special ASCII character, and it might be different depending on whether it is on a Windows computer or a Mac computer or a Linux computer. And so all this is saying is that RU will actually say it doesn't matter what the line endings are on the particular operating system. I'm going to convert them all to a standard carriage return for you. So that's kind of nice. So anyway, I'm just going to copy this code right here and put it in my notebook. So this is kind of fancy terminology, so I'm just going to say opens a file and reads each line and prints that line onto the screen. So that's what that function does. I'm just basically changing the comment so that it's in plain English. Okay. So this is going to open a file called foo.txt. Foo.txt doesn't exist, so if I try to run this, what do you suppose is going to happen?
Can't find file.
Right, it's gonna return. Oh, and then this is written for Python 2, so Python 2 didn't require those parentheses. So now I'm going to run it, and it's going to say, okay, the U mode doesn't even work anymore, so that's fine. Let's just turn this to R. There. Now I finally got the error I expected. What it's going to do is say, can you read the very bottom error there? No such file or directory, foo.txt. That's the error that I expected. Okay. If you're getting a different error, if you're trying to follow along and you're getting a different error, then what the problem is that you have some indenting that's a little bit different than I do. I'm actually going to modify mine a little bit because I don't want it indented at all. But there we go. That's indented. All right, but the only thing that we've really done in this is that we've opened a file for reading, and we've gone line by line and printed that line, that thing. We talked about this last week. What does the for statement do? It creates what? Something that we talked about last week. I think you said the word loop, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it creates a loop. So the way that we read this is, for each line in the file, print the line. And then it's going to close the file up. But we need to have it open an actual valid file. You need to give it the path to your file, wherever it is. I saved mine. Let's go find mine. I saved it under C, users, George. You might have saved yours in a different spot. Courses, SPA, week 3, and I called it points.txt. So I'm going to go where I've saved it on disk in Windows Explorer. I'm going to copy that and paste it here. So now I have the entire path to that file. Now if I try to run this, I'm pretty sure I'll get an error. Okay. Python doesn't actually like backslashes. Backslashes mean that you're inserting a special character. So to get it to ignore that, you put an R before your string. If you put an R before your string, what you're doing is saying, ignore any special characters that I put in and just treat them as regular characters. That's what the R stands for. Treat all special characters as regular characters. In other words, if I put a backslash, I mean I want a backslash. The weakness here is that you can't put in special characters. A backslash n is the way to put in a carriage return in a string without actually having to put a carriage return in. But we don't need to put in carriage returns, so we can just put that little R beforehand. So now it's going to read that file, except for I need to actually put the file name right here, right? /points.txt. So now it's going to read that file line by line and print out the results. And it should not get an error this time. Yep. See that? It printed out that each of those lines, and that comma is that comma says that it's so that it would print out an end of line character. It still did. I'm going to delete this. I think this is what they meant when they had that RU. I'm going to delete that comma there. Still get the same result. That's fine. All right. So it's printing out each character. Each line row by row, but there's actually a carriage return at the end of the line. And so it prints out the line with the carriage return, and then it prints out another line with the carriage return, and that's why you see the spaces between the lines. Okay. How could we remove just that carriage return? We can't actually see the carriage return with our eyes, but the very last character is a carriage return. What if we don't want that carriage return to be there? How could we remove it using what I've taught you? So in other words, what is line? It's just to drive this point home, I could rename this. And I'll do the exact same thing. Right? We just named it line for our own benefit. It's a variable that represents what? I'm reading the lines from a file. What do you think goes into the line? I'll change it back to line because I think it is helpful. Okay. What data type is line? Is what I'm asking. It's a what? Somebody say string? Yes, I was going to print the type of, print type line, run it. Yep, see, it's a string. Okay. Okay. So, knowing what we want to know now, strings or sequences. What if we want to not print the very last character in line? So this says print line. Yeah, so something like that, right? I want to print from the beginning 2 minus 1. In other words, I don't want the last character. I want all of line except for the last character. Now watch what happens when I run this.
So the last character was the space?
It was a carriage return.
Oh, carriage return, okay.
Yeah, see that? See, now I don't. The print statement already inserts a carriage return. Every time it sees a print, it puts the line plus a carriage return. Since line already had a carriage return, it was putting in 2 carriage returns, and that's why you saw the space. Does that make sense?
So if you wanted to print 3 carriage returns, you would have 3 spaces between that. Correct?
Well, I didn't print any of the carriage returns. I didn't create any of the carriage returns. Carriage return is like, I'm just saying a return, right? Why is it called carriage return, and why is it even called return? Anybody know?
Well, in a Word document, when you get the next line, you can state how far you want the line. I'm sure that we got code that automatically put carriage return in based on your selection that you know in the framework. So in Python, you have to know that there's a carriage return already built in at the end of that statement. So your job is to try to remove it if you know where it's at.
Right. So a carriage return, when I typed this out, I already closed it. Let's open it back up. When I typed this out in here, right, when I got to the word C, I actually pressed the return button, the enter button on my keyboard. Okay, in the old days when we had typewriters, the thing on the top that you put the paper in,
Right.
that was the carriage. It's carrying the paper, and it's moving across. And when you pressed enter, There actually wasn't an enter. You actually had to hit this like this thing that pulled out, and you hit it like this, and it advanced the line, and it moved it back over to the beginning, and then you could type some more, right? So there actually is an ASCII character right here that you don't see that represents go to the next line. And so what's happening here is that I'm just reading this line by line, and if I don't put this in other words, if I take this out right here, I'm leaving those characters in, plus print also inserts another carriage return. So we get print line plus the extra carriage return. So if we don't want that, we have to have that in there.
So do those brackets automatically come into that particular line by you have to hit a bracket in order to do that? You have to use some kind of character to bracket or
What bracket?
right at the line. You get line the two green bracket right?
These brackets right here? I typed them.
Okay. You just type it straight in.
Yeah, I typed. Yeah. For all intents and purposes, I typed everything here. I mean, I cut and pasted some of it, but it wouldn't matter if I typed it in or cut and pasted it. That's.
When you put the first, it automatically makes it so the second one comes in, right? You don't have to put the second one in
Second one, what?
the bracket. The last bracket.
Oh, I think Jupyter Notebooks does do that for you. Let's just test right now. Yeah, Jupyter Notebooks puts that second one in there for you. Same thing with the quote. No, I guess not. Yeah, it does put the second quote in.
I have a quick question about your -1. If you're trying to get just to take the spaces out. But it's also taking the end off the green as well.
Oh, that's not taking out the spaces, that's only taking off the end. The file we read from didn't have any spaces.
Oh, it did take off the /n. I mean, the n at the end of green.
Yeah, that's the negative one.
Oh, why did it take off that? That's a great question. From both, I mean, and you're starting to explain it right. So, why did it take off n out of the end there?
That's the last character, I remember.
That is the last. There's no carriage return after that. There's two ways I could solve this, right? One way I could solve this is that I could actually press enter here and then save this. And now if I rerun this, green will show up, right? And then the other way I could solve this is to insert an if statement that said, if the last character is a carriage return, get rid of it. Or I could just use replace. Let's do that. Sorry, what's that?
Technically, we're taking out the enter off of each line, essentially. Like you press after red to get to the next line, press after blue.
Yep.
Right, that's what -1 is actually taking off.
Yeah, because I'm saying I don't want that carriage return there. I mean, for what we're trying to do here, which is pull out these two values to isolate the x and the y coordinate, we really don't need to remove this. I was just showing you that it's there. And so let's try to remove, let's just say, let's do this. Clean line is equal to line dot replace So this is another way to do that. Okay, what do you think that line is trying to do or does? Do you guys have any questions? Like if you look at that line of code, what part don't you understand?
What that slash n mean?
Great. So what does that slash n mean? That's actually the special character that represents a carriage return.
Oh, okay, yes.
So now that you know that, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going on? Can you read the rest of that statement, or do you have another question about that line?
It replaces it and put nothing there.
Yes. So it takes a carriage return. Anytime it encounters a carriage return, it puts nothing there. It takes the carriage return out and puts nothing there. See what I'm saying? So now you've read that line. You understand what it does. So now I'm going to print my clean line, and it's going to do the same thing. Now this has the strength of, if I just went and deleted this last carriage return, say I just deleted that last carriage return, if I run this, I need to run this. Now I don't get that n disappearing. Even though there isn't a carriage return, it doesn't make the n disappear. Why? Because it's only replacing any carriage returns it finds with nothing. It's not replacing n's with nothing, just the special character.
So, talk about a loop. So everything after the 4 lines, anything in between that, it's gonna loop all the way through until it gets to the last line, and then close it out. So
Yep.
that sort of thing.
Yeah. So it's just going through F, which is a file, and every time it encounters a line, it's going to read it in. When there's no more lines left, it breaks out of the loop and then closes the file. If you don't close the file, then there's a danger that it won't let you open it and read it again. You might have to quit Python and open it back up for it to work if you forget to close the file. In fact, if I have an error here, if I said print x, it's going to give me an error, right? And I'm going to try to run this, and it says x isn't defined. Let's see what happens if I try to run this again. If I take x out and try to run this, okay, it still works. It doesn't always break, but sometimes if you leave the file open, like you had an error and you never were able to close it, it'll have a problem. But it doesn't always break. It's kind of inconsistent.
So if you take F close out, that kind of statement will run forever.
No. Like if we just take this out, it doesn't run forever. It's not closed.
It's still running.
No, it's not running anymore. Python's not running anymore. It's just the file is still open in the computer's memory.
Okay, so it's broken.
In this case, it's not broken, but it could cause it to break, particularly if you had it open for writing, which we won't cover till next week. But if you can open a file and put things in it.
Right.
And so if you opened it for writing and you left it open, and somebody else tried to open it for reading, it would probably be empty. It would break it. It's not actually going to write everything in until you close it out.
Right.
If you open it for reading, it's less dangerous not to close it. It can still cause problems, but not as many problems. If you open it for writing and you forget to close it, it'll be bad. It won't work for sure.
Right.
All right. So now that we've gone this far, what I really wanted to do is read a file line by line and get the coordinates of each line. Okay. So how do I get the coordinates of the line? Let's say, first of all, let's just say I want to isolate them into a particular variable. I want to say x equals, basically I want to say x equals, and I want x to equal something, and I want y to equal something, and I want those to equal numbers. I want them to actually be numbers, and I want this to be x and that to be y every time through the loop. Right? how would I do that?
You got to define X or look for X,
Like, see the 3 question marks I have?
right?
I want X. I want you to come up with some code. Like, code goes here. So how do I get X into the, how do I get a number into X? Knowing what we know now. By the way, what's that?
Find, it's something like find X, you go find X and turn it in here.
And then you have to change it to an integer too.
Yeah,
X is at the top.
Could you do it like the first 2, or like the first 3
X equals X.
characters are X?
the first 3 characters are X. What about, well, that would work for X. But would it work for Y, the next 3 characters?
No.
No.
You can separate it by, do a split by the commas.
You could split, right? Split it by commas. So we know the first thing that we're going to have to do here is say, we could just call this a split line equals clean line dot split, and what's the delimiter in this case? Ashley already said it. I heard.
Integer.
No, the you split it by
Commas.
commas. Yep. Okay, so this is going to split it. So now let's look at what happens if we print split line instead. I'm going to comment these out so that they're not there. Print split line. I'm actually going to take this out. I don't really care about that now. Okay. So now I run it, and X chord and Y chord and desk, that's one line. This is another line. By the way, I'm going to change this to line and show you real quick. See how they have that slash n? That's the character term. You're totally fine. Just work in here as much as you want. No problem. They have the slash n, slash n, slash n. But if I type clean line here, I'll get it without that because I cleaned it off. I think there's a function actually for removing all white space. I don't know what it is, but you could search that as well. Okay, that might be a better one to use than replace, is what I'm trying to say. In some computer programming languages, removing all white space, it's called trim. So it might be called that in Python too. All right. So, okay. So I want my X to equal the number, but so how do I get that? How do I get that now? How do I get 4.4? Let's say I'm on the loop the second time through. How do I get just 4.4 and store it in X?
Well, that's the second string. Well, one.
Second line.
Second line.
It's the second line.
First variable.
It's the first variable, right? So let's go like this.
That'd be 1, 1, something like that.
Well, this is a loop. So we could go something like this. X is equal to split line. And how do I get the first variable? Sorry. Yeah, how do we get the first variable?
The bracket in there or something?
Yeah, brackets. How do we get just the first variable?
You put 1.
Remember, it's 0 based.
Okay, so
1 was a good guess, though.
0.
1 less than 1.
What is the 1 is 0?
Yep, 0. All right, now if I run this, well, let's print X first. Sorry. If we print X, what are we going to get? Instead of this, we're going to get what?
Should get 4.4, right?
Well, it's going to run, what, the first time through the loop, what's it going to equal? What's x going to equal?
0?
No, X cord.
It's going to equal, yes, the word x chord. The second time through the loop, it's going to equal 4.4, and then 5.3, and then 6.3.
Okay.
See? That look kind of like what you thought it would look like, Ashley? From
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So we're getting close. We want just the x coordinates. I mean, sorry. We want just the coordinates. We don't want that. What if we always knew that there was going to be a header, and we didn't want to read the first line? How could we ignore the first line in this code? What could we do in order to ignore the first line?
Type 1. 1 would overlook it. That first line, wouldn't it? You go automatically to.
Where? Where are you talking about? One where?
Well, when you put split there, put split 1 on there.
Put 1 here.
Okay.
Now I just get the second column, the y coordinates.
Second.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Could you put 0, 1 on there? 0, 1, that thing is like split now. Put 0, 1. 0,
I was thinking 0, 2, 1.
Yeah, really.
That's just going to give us the first element. Still.
Somehow you're gonna have to make it skip the first line, but I'm not sure how you do.
well, it would be.
Right. So the logic flow here is that we need to somehow make it skip the first line, but we don't know how to do that. Okay. All right. Logically, can anybody think of a way logically to do that, to make it not read the first line of the file?
Could you put R strip on there? That's that thing you was talking about before. R strip takes out all white space.
Okay. No, that would just be a different way to do this replace.
Okay.
So it's strip in Python, not trim.
We use that thing we used earlier where we start from position 3.
To read starting in a different place.
Right.
We might be able to do
I
that.
think for X, since in this case they're all just 3 digits, we start from position 3 and read on. That will give us a second.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the.
One more work if more than 3 digits.
Well, can you remove the first line like you did before? Remove the first line and then go into it?
Yeah, you could remove the first line.
But that was what you were talking about.
Yeah. Yes, that might work. So I'm gonna provide a twist on what Elvis is saying. Let's say we, instead of printing them all out, we just shove them into a list. Like we read it in and we created a new list and we just put all the elements into a list. And when we did that, once we were done, we just removed the first item of the list. Okay? So let's, I'm going to copy this down here and do something similar to what Elvis has suggested. So we're going to say line list is equal to, we actually haven't talked, surprisingly, we haven't talked about how to make a brand new list yet. Okay, the way you create a brand new list is to just do that. So this creates a brand new list. Line list is equal to a brand new list. Now we have talked about adding elements to a list. So we could, I'm going to delete these lines. We could say line list is equal to, line list dot append split line. So now what we're doing is taking split line and we're putting it into line list. And at the end, we could simply print line list and see what it looks like.
It doesn't have to be indented in. Fine.
No, I'm going to print the entire list. I'm going to build the list and print the entire thing, so I'm going to put it outside of the... So now, what is this monstrosity that we've created here? It's a list, and then what are each element in the list?
The lines.
Rows.
The lines that we split apart.
The lines that we split apart, and those are lists too. So technically, this line list is a list of lists that contain strings. It's the list of lists that contain strings. So if we want to access any particular item in there, we can do that by saying line list, and then we can specify which list we want. So let's say I want the second list or the third list, because they're still zero based. And then I want the second item in that list, which would be 1. I could do that. What's this when I execute this, what's it gonna do? Let's think about that for a second. Line list, first of all, what's that gonna return?
Line list will return 4.4.
What's just line list bracket 2 bracket going to return?
That's going to be your third list, right?
It's going to be the third list. So which list is that going to be?
5, 3, 7, 1, and 2.
Yes. So this is going to return. This is the 0 list. This is the 1 list. This is the 2 list. So if I run this, I get just that list. So now if I do this, what am I going to get? I'm going to get 7.1. That's what Benjamin set up here, and that's the right answer.
But you're saying within the second list, I want the first item. Right?
Exactly.
Or, yeah.
Right? Now,
Well, the second item, but it's like...
it's the second item, but it's labeled 1. Now, what happens if I do this? This is going a little bit further here.
Does it die? So just gives you just the die?
I think that you're on the right track, but remember this is 2.
Right, but so 7, that'd be 1.
Right, it would just give you the 1. That's the second. That's the third element, the second index in that list. See what I'm saying? So that's why you're just getting this 1. Okay. All right, that's just kind of interesting. Now, let's practice with lists and sequences there. Okay. But the reason that that's worked is that we took line list, we're getting 0, 1, 2, so we're getting this entire list, and then we're going to return just this element because this is 0, 1, and then 2 is going to return just 1 out of that element, just that last element in that sequence, that string sequence. All right. So, going a little further on what, maybe I'll leave that in there, on what Elvis said, if I want to now get rid of the first element of the list, I could do something. Instead of line list, I could say line list is equal to line list, but I don't want the first element. How can I not get the first element? Everything but the first element.
Line list minus line list and acquisition.
Let's see. I'm trying to think of this logically because we want everything except for the first element. Oh yeah, that'll work, right? So this will work because it's starting at element 1 to the end of the list.
Yeah.
So now if I print line list, it should be what I want, right?
Okay. It's much cleaner than trying to figure out where you're at, see where you're at now. And now with this formula line is 2, 1, 2, this still work?
Will this still work? Yes, but now it'll give me period. Right? Why does it give me period now?
10.
1, 2.
10 makes an extra space. So
Right. So line list 2 returns just. I can't see. If
You are point.
line list 2 returns just this whole thing. Then line list 2, 1 returns this guy. And line list 2, 1, 2 returns just that guy.
So the 2, 1 is that second group, and the 1 is the first thing is 10, 1, right? And then the 1 is the actual capital.
Yep. The 2 is the third character in that list. Okay. All right. Okay, so getting back to this problem, we still haven't assigned the values to x and y every time through the loop. Well, we have gotten rid of the first line, but now if we want to get those values of x and y, we basically have to construct another list. Another loop. So we could do something like this. We could say for line in line list, print. Now if we run this, we're going to get a clean line list without the first line. So now how do we get the x's and the y's? Let's say I want to put in x equals and y equals. What do I put here to get x into x? What do I need? What do I need to type? Let's not call these lines anymore. Let's call this row just so we don't get confused with the last one. And it doesn't really matter, but now we have a different variable name. So there needs to be code. There needs to be code after that row. What do I need to put in there? To make x an actual number, how do I need to modify this line?
Well, you just have to get rid of the last 2 variables of each line. Then you might just get x by itself.
Yeah, but can I not reference just x by itself?
Yeah, that's the first one, so we can say print 1.
It's actually the first one, so it's not 1, it's what?
0.
And y is what?
Row 1.
Yep. Okay, now what if I wanted to change those into floats rather than having be strings?
Okay.
You do a type float,
Yep. Benjamin gave the right answer there. So now x and y are actually floats. And if I want to print them, I just can put print x comma y. And I'm going to run this. So now I've printed the row, and then I've printed the X and the Y there. So I'm gonna. Okay, so now I just have X and Y. Now I could do something with that. Like I could actually calculate the distance every time through the loop. I could calculate the distance from the last point to the next point. I just put it in that distance formula I did last week. All right.
So you're saying that you can run a loop, and each time it'll give you the next X value to that particular.
I could actually just modify this loop right here to be calling the distance function that we had from last week. Okay. There are a few other. Well, sorry, go ahead.
Suppose you wanted to print this, the second X. You already defined the X's. Now you want to, after that, once it print, you want to get the second X. Can you make it out into one statement?
Sorry, ask it again. I didn't understand.
The second line, you just wanted the second X. Statement 5.3.
Just the second X? That would be 1, 0, right? 5.3. Because it's the second one is actually indexed as 1. The second element, the second row is indexed as 1. The first element is indexed as 0. So the way I get the second one is say 1, and then the way I get the first thing in that list is 0. And if I wanted to turn that into a number, I could. I could say float that, and then I would get I'd actually get it as a number rather than as a string.
Suppose you know what the number was, but you wanted no greater than 7 and less than 7 and greater than 5. No, greater than 4.5. How can you find that? Because you're looking for a particular range. Less than 7 and greater than 4.5.
Which number?
The X.
The X has to be less than 7 but greater than 4.5?
Right.
I could put that in the list. I could put that up here and say if X is greater than 7, no, sorry, 4.5.
Right.
And is it and? It's and in Python. And X is less than what? 7?
7.
For an X, comma. Oh, sorry. Python 2 didn't require the parentheses, so sometimes I gotta have it. There you go. So now.
Know what the term is, we get all the range of X values.
So that does that.
Okay.
All right, so there's a few other concepts that we want to talk about, or a few other skills that we want to enhance with our sequences. But this last question that Elvis just asked actually leads into that. But we'll do that as part of the lab. So I'm going to save this, and then it's 1:30. So let's meet back at 1:45, and we'll get into the last concept, and it'll build right into what I want you to do in the lab. Okay. All right. I just put the code from the lecture portion up there, along with my points test. And now I'm going to stop the video for the break.